Hey everyone, and ready your keyboards, because this is sure to be a divisive one. First, we've got problems with third-party packages, notably in the AUR, being a pain again for the original app developer. We also have more malware appearing in the AUR, which I think should open up a conversation about how you validate those packages on the AUR. We also have Hyperland launching a subscription service for more perks, which I know some of you really don't like, but we also have some cool stuff like KDE launching their own distro. And we also have this segue to our sponsor. This video is sponsored by TuxCare. They offer tools and services to simplify the maintenance of your open source stacks through automation and security support, like for example their rebootless live patching or their endless lifecycle support, which gives you security fixes for your end-of-life Linux distros, for your open source apps, but also for languages and runtimes. Speaking of which, they of course support Red Hat Enterprise Linux 7 with that endless lifecycle support. Rail 7 is end of life, but you might not have had time to migrate to something new, or maybe you simply can't. But running Rail 7 without security fixes for an entire year is obviously not a long-term solution, and so TuxCare offers a simple script that lets you gain instant security by moving to their repos, which will provide you with ongoing vulnerability fixes for as many years as you need. It means you can stay on your outdated version for years and still maintain compliance and security against vulnerability exploits. Over 5,000 CVEs have been patches to date by TuxCare, and this includes not just the OS, but also a long list of crucial packages, so you can stay compliant with your security obligations while you plan your migration, or you can just stay on Rail 7 for as long as you want. As always, click the link in the description to learn more. So, KDE Linux, the official KDE distribution, now has testing builds to download. The main goal is to have the official version of the KDE desktop and apps available without any customization, any tweaks, or anything else that a distro might add or change. The software collection the KDE devs want to showcase with the defaults that they picked and the look and feel and layout they decided upon as the base. It's basically software as intended by the developers. Now you might think it's exactly like KDE Neon, but it's not, because KDE Neon was sort of a side project with kind of the main goal but not the main resources, and it was Ubuntu based on an LTS. This one, the new KDE Linux, is derived from Arch Linux, but it is an Arch-based distro like SteamOS is an Arch-based distro. It's really not. It doesn't use Pacman, it doesn't use the AUR, it is a read-only base, so it's what you would call an immutable distro, and it uses systemd sysupdate for system updates and rollbacks in case of a problem. There is no X11 session in there, it's a Wayland-only distribution, and it's a volunteer effort, and obviously still just for testing and development purposes right now. But it is really nice to have an official distro for the desktop, if only to be able to accurately gauge what works and what doesn't, without all the potential problems that can be introduced with distro packages, distro configs, that can all alter how well a desktop runs, the bugs it has, and how it is perceived. Now, I'll make sure to give a quick look at KDE Linux, maybe next week in a quick video. I know it's not ready, but just to look at the base, how it works, how you update it, the potential limitations, and if it does anything really special with the desktop, although I would expect it to be just the normal vanilla standard, so it's more the base that we'll look at. Now, while Linux is increasingly interesting to developers as a platform, with packaging formats that tend to solve most of the hurdles we had in distributing software on Linux, and we also have a gigantically growing user base, it's not always a success story when you bring your app to Linux. For example, DuckStation PS1, a PlayStation 1 emulator, has now pulled their software from the AUR, and they're also considering pulling out of Linux entirely. Now, they provided a package built on the AUR, an official one, because, well, the unofficial ones that existed there weren't all that great. Presumably, the developer must have received a bunch of bug reports for these half-broken packages, which they couldn't do anything about because it was the package creating the problem. The issue is, providing an official version did not stop unofficial packages from being created and published, often in a broken state, which resulted in even more complaints on the bug tracker. The dev stated that they now explicitly forbid packages for DuckStation, a move that we've seen repeat often lately, because, well, unofficial packages can be a pain for some complex applications. We have the bottles situation coming to mind, but also OBS with the Fedora Flatpaks, and a bunch of other applications also said, hey, please stop repackaging our apps. We have an official version, it works well, your unofficial packages are creating a lot of work for us, we don't want it. Alongside this change, the developer says that the next step will be removing Linux support entirely, since it's like 2% of their user base and they don't use it themselves. The code can't apparently be forked legally either, because it is under the Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license, meaning any third-party package is not allowed because it is derivative works, and forks aren't either because they are derivative works as well. And this is a complex issue, because on the one hand, third-party packages are sometimes the only way you have to run a specific piece of software on a specific system. But on the other hand, if the developer has provided an official way of running that software, this is what you should use. Unofficial third-party packages just create potential problems. If you are savvy enough to not report bugs with that unofficial package to the original developer, or if you're savvy enough to identify what is a packaging problem and what is a software problem, then that's fine. But a lot of users are not capable of that, and so developers get tons of bug reports for stuff that they have no control over, and even when they said, this is how you use our software, I don't want to hear about any other way of using it, they still get pestered about formats that are out of their control. And this, I think, is really annoying, especially since a lot of app stores don't clearly mark the fact that those third-party packages are not official. In distro repos, you have no clue. In the AUR, as far as I can tell, you have no clue that something is not distributed by the developer. This should be clearly written in the name of the package. It shouldn't be called Google Chrome if it's not officially from Google. It should be called Google Chrome third-party build or Google Chrome unofficial, and the logo should be changed as well, so it is very, very clear for every single user that this is not an official build, and that reporting bugs to the original developer on that package makes no sense. Now, still on the AUR and third-party packages, there's another case of malware making its way into this repo. A package called Google Chrome Stable installed a remote access Trojan on user systems, potentially giving attackers access to the device and letting them steal some files, some data, or even install more harmful software. The package, this time, should have been pretty suspicious from the get-go. It was uploaded by a brand new user that had just registered, and the install script pointed to a file that itself launched a bash script running a Python command that downloads an external resource. It's not even well hidden, the URL is right there in the script. The package was removed a few hours after publication, but it shouldn't even have been published in the first place. The policy should never be publish first and remove it if it's problematic. It should be do not publish until it's reviewed. I understand that you do need a lot of manpower to enforce that, that's fair, but at least don't let brand new accounts that never published anything get straight to the AUR without any review, especially when it's a package for a very well-known and very popular application. Now, this is a problem with most app stores or package repositories, because even on FlatHub and even on Snap, while you do have some amount of verification, you also have some stuff that goes through. Now, there are a set of guidelines that should absolutely be implemented everywhere. You should never authorize someone who just created their account to publish something without manual verification, and you probably, if you don't have a manual process for every app, you should have at least a check mark or a tag visible by users to let them know that this app has been vetted by a human. It's not a guarantee that everything is safe, but at least you know that this thing should be looked at and this thing should be entirely ignored because no one even opened the install script or the package build. I think you really need to put those kind of things in place, because if not, you're just opening the door to every single type of problem. Now, Hyperland, the Wayland tiling window manager / compositor, launched a paid subscription, something that is pretty rare in the Linux sphere, especially for window managers. It's called Hyper Perks, and it costs €5 per month plus taxes, And it gives you a few extra things, notably support from the developer, some member-only access to the forum, and Q&As with the developers. It also comes with a set of pre-configured config files, so you can start with something that is already well tested. And of course, contributing through HyperPerks supports the development of the Hyperland project. Now, if you've been following the channel for a while, you know I'm not a big fan of tiling window managers, and you know I'm not a big fan of the person behind the Hyperland project, but this is beside the point. I think this is fine. $5 a month is what I'm paying to GNOME and KDE as a donation, without any counterpart apart from having access to their absolutely excellent desktop and applications. I think it's fine. $5 a month might seem too much, and if that's the case, you just don't pay it, and you keep using Hyperland for free because nothing is paywalled. The entire feature set is still here, and if you do feel that Hyperland is really good, then you can pay those $5 a month, and you're supporting the project, and you're also getting some stuff in exchange. I think it's fine. I really don't see a problem with this. Now, the Linux kernel 6.16 was released last weekend, coming with big changes to major file systems, notably XFS, now able to do what they call large atomic writes, meaning that writing multi-blocks to disk will either fully complete or not complete at all, so you won't have data being half written in case your computer shuts down or there's a big bug. X4 also got some improvements in the performance department, which means sequential writes or reads should be up to 37% faster now. There's also USB offload support, meaning embedded devices can maintain their audio streams while the rest of the device goes idle, which means you should be able to save more power on battery because the computer can basically shut everything down except what powers the USB audio. There's support for a bunch of new Intel extensions. There's also easier options to tailor the kernel when building it for a specific CPU and the feature level it has. There are updates to BetterFS and NFS. There's more Rust support. There's a new driver for OpenVPN, which makes this all work a lot better. There's zero-copy transmission from the GPU to the network, potentially useful for data centers, and the usual slew of hardware support as well. There are also updates to Bcachefs while we wait to see if it's still part of the kernel in 6.17 or if Torvalds go through with his statement that this will be removed. Now, as always, you get better hardware support and more features for free. That is a nice perk of Linux, although depending on your distro, you do get that perk or maybe not. Now, Samsung just gave a big middle finger to custom Android ROMs because they've now entirely disabled the ability to unlock the bootloader of Samsung phones with their One UI 8 update, which is basically the name they give to their Android version. This means that there is no way of installing a custom operating system on their phones anymore. It was already pretty tricky, you had to use specific tools to even manage that. Hardware support was very spotty in custom ROMs, but now it's just not a thing anymore at all. In the US, I think this was already completely locked, but this is now also applying everywhere else. Of course, only the phones that do receive that update will be locked. If you already were using a custom ROM, you're not getting that One UI update, so you're okay, but newer Samsung phones will no longer be an option for enthusiasts, it seems. Now, I have no idea whether this move is legal in the EU or not. I'm pretty sure at some point there was a law or a regulation stipulating that you cannot lock down some hardware like that, but I might be entirely wrong. At any rate, it absolutely sucks to have those generally pretty cool devices not available at all anymore as a choice for custom ROMs. They were never really well supported by most custom ROMs, but when you could get one to run on a Samsung device, it was like the best of both worlds. It's really solid hardware with a good operating system. It's sad that it's no longer going to be possible. Now, in another the water is wet moment, the Opera browser filed a complaint against Microsoft, this time in Brazil. They're alleging that Microsoft is giving their Edge browser an unfair advantage on Windows, which, duh. Opera had already made similar moves in the EU, taking the European Commission to court over their exemption of Microsoft Edge from the Digital Markets Act, because Edge did not have the threshold of users and market share to be considered a gatekeeper. But now, Opera is doing the same in Brazil, arguing that Edge being pre-installed and the default browser prevents competitors from receiving the attention they could, and also prevents them from competing on their own merits. Microsoft also pushes manufacturers to only pre-install Microsoft Edge, and not anything else. Although this isn't resulting in any major market share because Edge barely reaches more than 11% worldwide. Opera also says that there are a variety of dark patterns that Microsoft uses to make sure users keep using Edge over other browsers. All of these have been very well documented, like opening certain system links in Edge, no matter your default browser, auto-importing tabs from Chrome to make it look like you're using the browser you know, but it's not, and also changing that default app for web pages difficult and resetting user preferences as well. Now, all in all, there is zero doubt that yes, Microsoft is abusing their dominant position with Windows to push Edge and other software. They're doing it with literally every single thing they build. It's Edge, it's Office, it's Outlook, it's Copilot, it's whatever else. They're pushing all of their stuff through Windows because that's the only thing they have that has sizable market share, maybe apart from GitHub, but it doesn't act as a vector to push more Microsoft technologies apart from that dumbass Copilot. But yeah, whether a court will recognize that and act on it, that's entirely different. And generally, in the world, no one considers Edge to be a big problem because it has small market share, and so generally, nothing happens. Now, the EU seems to be giving up on their digital sovereignty and independence from the United States with a double whammy of first caving into the tariffs, hopefully this doesn't get ratified, but also starting a pilot test to use Google Play's Integrity API for their age verification Android app, meaning that this application would be entirely bound to Google and would completely exclude any alternative Android ROM or any alternative app store from being usable. Basically, what the EU is doing is they're adding mandatory age verification for a bunch of stuff, including downloading certain age-gated applications, as the EU would rely on Google's APIs to check whether the phone has been tampered with. Any alternative app store would just not be able to use that age verification app and thus probably be deemed illegal, and so any custom ROM that is de-Googled and doesn't have the Play Store would also be unusable. Now, apart from that, it's also a big privacy nightmare because this would force Android users to use an official Google-enabled Android build, which is basically spyware, and many privacy advocates are sounding the alarm on this, like the Electronic Frontier Foundation. This whole age verification thing is supposed to take effect in 2026, and while the Google Play Integrity API is just being tested in 5 countries, if it is adopted, this would be a pretty big step back. Obviously, the EU's position on digital sovereignty is pretty unclear right now. They keep saying they need it, they keep saying they want to push for it, but at the same time they cave in to the US and they start using US technology for fundamental independent bricks of that digital sovereignty, which makes absolutely no sense. I don't know why they keep flip-flopping around, but this would obviously be a full-on disaster for all of these efforts. Hopefully this doesn't go through. Hopefully countries, when they implement that age verification application, don't use that API, especially since there is another one available that is apparently considered more secure than the Google API, and it's open source and free of charge, so I really don't get it. And on the other hand, the European Commission listed on their website a long document to outline a roadmap for EU digital sovereignty. Something that, they're flip-flopping around, and I don't really understand. Now, this wasn't written by the European Commission. It's posted on the European Commission website, but it's been written by basically a lobby for EU cloud and edge computing. So take it with a grain of salt, of course. The roadmap that they're pushing is, first, making sure that the EU lowers reliance on tech that comes from outside its borders and lowers reliance on tech that is closed source, so using open source solutions that comply with the GDPR. There's also the usual, let's have fewer barriers for companies, because it's written by a lobby, and there's an environmental goal in there, which is the least detailed of all of them, but they had to add it, I guess. To reach these objectives, what they propose is building open and interoperable standards and software, which for the most part already exist, and with dedicated EU funding, making sure that we have skilled developers able to take advantage of said software and standards, and making sure that EU countries prioritize open source solutions. It's the usual public money, public code mantra, but they also added open source first and European preference to that, which I think makes sense. The document then outlines why an EU open source stack is needed, which we all know why. They also outline the current landscape, which isn't that great currently, apart from a lot of regulations. We don't really produce software. And they also point obstacles, notably the lack of standards for interoperability, which I would disagree with. Those standards for open stuff already exist everywhere. Funding and investment hurdles, which, yeah, that's an issue. Adoption barriers, which also is an issue. And the skill gap, because obviously you need to train people to use that open source stack. Their actual proposal follows with a few key actions, like defining tech specs as the open standard for the EU, launching pilot projects, it's all the usual stuff. They also promote the creation of a dedicated EU open source fund, like what GitHub recently pushed for as well, but I would much rather it be piloted by EU-based companies and smaller ones than GitHub and Microsoft, obviously. Now, this is all wishful thinking for now. It's not something that the EU is actively working on. It's just a piece of paper, well, a digital paper, written by a lobby. So there's no telling if something happens with that. And also, it is being written by a lobby, so obviously it's gonna place companies first and not individuals. But still, it is nice to have the European Commission push for that thing, even though, as we've seen, we don't really know where they really stand on that digital sovereignty stuff. It kind of looks like they don't really know themselves, or they are maybe conflicting opinions and efforts. Obviously, this is probably the best chance open source and Linux had in years, like having support for a full-on big geopolitical entity would be really cool, but until projects actually materialize and happen, I don't think this is going to amount to anything. Well, that's gonna be it. I'm gonna leave you on this message from our sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. So if you are a regular watcher or listener of my stuff, you probably already heard about Tuxedo. They make laptops and desktops that ship with Linux pre-installed. They have a wide range of computers, from laptops to desktops, from small form factor entry-level ones to high-end gaming or desktop workstations. They have everything, a bunch of hardware options for each device. They now offer devices with ANSI keyboard layouts and ISO keyboard layouts, of course, as well. They ship to most countries in the world. I personally only use their devices these days. Everything I produce and create and publish is made on one of their laptops, and I only game on one of their desktops plugged into my TV, serving as a gaming console. If you need a new computer, you want to run Linux on it, and you want to support a company that actively contributes to Linux, click the link in the description and get yourself a Tuxedo device. They're really, really good. And this will conclude this episode. I hope you enjoyed doing something else while this was playing in the background. As always, you know where all the YouTube buttons are, you know where the comment section is, and why you should either click the buttons or type something in that comment section. It's YouTube, you know how it works. You have plenty of links in the description to support the show if you want to, and in the meantime, I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!